2:17 in the morning from the alarm company. And I remember showing on my shorts and my wife saying, "Oh, bloody pal, that bloody alarm, what's going on?" And stopped about half a mile down the road by the police roadblock. And I said, "Well, I'm terribly sorry, I've got to go through. I think we've got burglars at the Unruly Pig." And he said, "You from the Unruly Pig, sir? Your pub's on fire." I don't know why. Probably because I love the damn place so much. Yeah. My business partner and head chef, Dave Wall, God bless him, will say, "Look for the positive. I did get a new kitchen out of this," which I love Italian food. I don't know. It's in my DNA. I like the way. I love the crazy driving. I love how they haven't destroyed their hill towns, etc. I just love their cuisine and particularly how it varies so dramatically from region to region.
Did you went round the pubs around here?
Yeah, and then just looked, I thought, Christ, everybody's so the same. Fish and chips, sticky toffee pudding, chocolate brownie, pork belly. If you're the same as everybody else, you're going to be chased on price.
Brendan, thank you so much for doing this.
My absolute pleasure.
And thank you for a wondrous, absolutely insanely delicious lunch this afternoon. It was just, as I said, I've heard so much about this pub, this restaurant, how highly acclaimed it is, voted the best pub in the UK on so many awards. And it really has lived up to that. In fact, it's gone past that. It was astounding. Thank you.
The check's in the post, Dan. Thank you very much.
And there's loads of places. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But where I want to start is the fire. Yeah. And I don't know how. I think you were like 6 months in or something. But
not even that. 12 weeks.
12 weeks. So you've left your corporate job as a lawyer. You finally decided to take the leap of faith, follow your passion, open a restaurant. 12 weeks in to your dream. Your dream's on fire. Describe the feeling in your soul when you found out that your beloved restaurant and pub is on fire.
I can. It still causes me to draw breath and I think disproportionately upset. I mean, I was talking about this the other day with somebody who before. You hear somebody has a miscarriage or a fire, you say, "Oh, that must be awful." And then when you are unlucky enough to encounter a miscarriage, and in my case, a fire, only then does it really bring home how absolutely devastating it was. And I think people standing back might say, "Look, it was bad." Yeah, I get that. But was it really that bad? Nobody was injured, and isn't that a positive? Of course it's a positive. I think there's something about... the point you made, which was, this has always been my dream. This is my little retirement project. I may have needed neuroleptic medication to do it, but and people think I'm mad.
What's neuroleptic?
Oh, you give it to schizophrenics.
Right,
you give it to schizophrenics. Yeah. Apparently. Sorry for the avoidance of doubt, I'm not schizophrenic. I used to do some mental health stuff. Neuroleptic medication goes to schizophrenics, and people sort of said, "You must be bloody bonkers to want to go and do this." But it was my dream, and it did disproportionately upset me. And to your question, I don't know that I've ever wept so much. Well, that's not right. Mum and Dad died, maybe, but it was. I was really, really upset about it all. It was a very difficult time because it wasn't straightforward with insurers. We eventually get that resolved, but there's lots of sleepless nights, and when you've achieved this dream, and you've invested heart, soul, and money, and then you don't really know whether you're going to get back on your trotters, so to speak. And one of the things that the head chef will still say, God bless him, my business partner and head chef, Dave Wall, God bless him, will say, "Look for the positive. I did get a new kitchen out of this," which I can't look at it that way because it was a horrific period, and I've never encountered anything so much that can still cause my eyes still to water, and trying to get to the bottom of why, I don't know, but it had a disproportionate effect. In the context that I used to be a litigator, I wasn't a shy chap. I was used to dealing, sadly, my bread and butter was dealing with tragedy, gas explosions, rail accidents, etc. To this day, I can't explain it, but it got to my core.
And when you said it got to your core, like, describe that a bit more, because I think that's because I think what we've said there is your dream was on fire.
Well, I suppose part of it is the drama of, you get this call at 2:17 in the morning from the alarm company, and we'd had a series of false alarms, and I nearly didn't come down, and I remember showing on my shorts and my wife saying, "That bloody pal, that bloody alarm, what's going on?" And I stopped about half a mile down the road by the police roadblock, and I said, "Well, I'm terribly sorry, I've got to go through. I think we've got burglars at the Unruly Pig." And he said, "Are you from the Unruly Pig, sir? Your pub's on fire." That was it. I think I burst into... Anyway, I don't know why. Probably because I love the damn place so much.
Yeah.
And it really got to me, and it was a hard period. But what, I tell you, got to me even more in a positive way, we were told we would be closed for initially over a year. And
So just for some context, so what had actually happened, like, and
Well,
how much of it had been decimated?
I'd say, my apologies, that's really important. We lost between about 45 to 50% of the pub. So the pub is essentially a medieval building next to a Regency building. All of the building was smoke and water damaged, but physically destroyed was the upper half of the medieval building, all the beams, beautiful medieval beams, part of the cellar, all of the kitchen prep area, all of the walk-in fridge. As to the cause, I don't know we ever got to the bottom of it. The police and the fire service thought it was the walk-in fridge. There were various theories, and it is what it is, but it wasn't, as people, it's a kitchen fire, but it wasn't. It wasn't. We had, it was hard. It was hard putting it back all together, but we did it. One of the most emotional things for me was we had to sit down early doors when we were told that we'd close for a year, and talk with the head chef and the manager and sort of say, "Look, we're going to be closed for a year. Are you still with me? Because there's this guy who's been with me for 12 weeks, opened up this bar. It's been really hard. Anybody who's opened a restaurant bar, it's really hard. And you just make mistake after mistake after mistake and hopefully learn from it." And, and he said, "No, I'm sticking with you," which took me aback. And I think bigger and better people than Dave Wall might have said, "Shit, this is a disaster from the outset, and if he thinks I'm hanging around for you, what the hell am I going to do?" I mean, and it was hard damn work, and I'm not sure, maybe this pub is not meant to be, but he was there and he stood.
Yeah, because he was at a point in his career where he could have kicked on to something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like for listeners, he wasn't like, he was quite.
Well,
he worked for Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, he worked for Gordon Ramsay. He worked for By Bendham. His provenance was huge. He was at the Toll booth. These are all pucker restaurants. He's a highly valued commodity. But let me tell you something about the milk of human kindness. It's a bit like COVID. People say it brought out the best and the worst in people.
It's the there's like calamity can bring out, as you said, the good and the bad in people, but you see that on people can be absolute dickheads with these things.
But I had customers, and there's a guy called Guy Nichols. He's probably our best customer, and he's loved by the staff. And I barely knew the guy. He's on, "What can I do? What can I do?" And customers buying gift vouchers to try and keep us going. And I never forget, he was in at the weekend, a lovely chap called Justin Solomon, and we were talking about this and the trials and tribulations of the Unruly Pig, and the successes, of course, thanks to Dave and Carl and the rest of the team. And he said, "Do you remember that night where I was in and his friend was a retained fireman from Orford, which is a village just down the road, and what happened was there was a massive gas explosion because eventually whatever caused the fire the liquid petroleum gas tank that I had went up, and there was a
This is here, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
massive fireball.
How big, when you came here, was it on fire?
It was on fire. Yeah, when I was allowed, I was called.
Describe what it looked
Okay,
like.
well, I was called at 2:17. I arrived here about 2:30. That's where the roadblock was, and we arrived. We were allowed up at about 5:30. Obviously, they had doused most of the fire, but you could. What I could see was the upper floor of the pub gone.
Fuck.
The kitchen destroyed, the bashed in door where they'd had to bash in with it to get the fire brigade in. The place was a wreck, and the upper floors were still smouldering. Yeah,
That's wild. It's wild. And then what that next day, like talk me through how you survived that, because I think when any people who listen to this podcast, there's a quote I kind of use a lot, and it's by the founder of the Four Seasons, and its excellence is the ability to withstand pain. And I like that, because there's an ability to, whatever you're trying to do, or the other phrase someone said to me is like, your hope needs grit. So your dream of this glorious pub needs the ability to, like, it's like the fucking thing's on fire. And you, what's your ability to take that pain? Do you know what I mean?
Frankly, I think it was limited. But as my mother used to say in her lilting Irish, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes.
And it did make us stronger. I don't know. You're shell shocked for a couple of days, and then you're dealing with insurers, which is not straightforward, and you're then dealing with the team and trying to actually put on that brave face. I'm pretty good at that mostly, not always, as people.
So what did you say to the team when you got them in here?
I just said,
did you get them in here?
No. We had them all around the house,
Yeah.
and we were waiting for confirmation as to whether the insurers would pay out. And the first thing was to reassure them that we are staying put. Dave had committed to staying put. The management had committed to stay. We will pay you regardless, even though at that stage we didn't really have the wherewithal. We certainly didn't have the wherewithal and income to do it. But it was a stage that you just needed to make a commitment pending here. Now, happily, the insurers decided to pay out, and that's another day. But what you needed to do was to try and reassure the team that although there has been this incident, that it isn't the end of the world. We're going to come back stronger. It's going to take time, and all of that jazz. And I used to do a little bit of this in my former job, because sometimes when you're knackered and you've had enough and you're stressed to hell and the figures aren't right, but you had to come in and be breezy and upbeat. Whereas, sometimes you just wanted to hide yourself in a corner. So we did all that, and then poor old Dave, the head chef, and Kevin, the then manager, then had to come and work at 111 The Thoroughfare, which is my home, and the dining room became the office. And you know what? Those of hospitality who have been through a fire, and sadly, it's not uncommon, will know this. It's damn hard work, but it is what it is. And eventually, you begin to see some positives. Things like Dave being able to draw breath, which he hadn't on the menu offering. Look, I'm not sure we got this right. This is where we were going wrong. The menu was too big. Let's cut it back, and try to deal with some of the positives in life. And then, of course, it gives you the opportunity to look at the structure of the team, and that's when Carl Green came along. He was our sous chef. He's now our very proud head chef, and he's been here with Dave since the fire, so 8-9 years. And so I think I exaggerate, because I think the man standing back would say, yeah, that was a blow. That was a big blow. And I get why it's difficult. You get a bit emotional about it. But there were some positives in that, not least Dave Walker in your kitchen. And also, when we came back, we thought, well, okay, the place is a wreck, because it was wrecked. But the room we were in here, this was sodden and smoke-filled. And we thought, well, we've got the builders in, let's try and do some alterations. So that's when we knocked through the bar. So
do you think this would have become, if the fire hadn't happened, do you think you could have become the best UK's #1 pub?
That's a difficult question. I think Dave would say no, because I'm not sure that's right, because whatever was wrong with the kitchen, if he'd come to me and said, look, this kitchen's holding me up and it's precluding us from doing this and making the standard and making the cut, providing the business case was made out, which inherently it would have been, I probably would have done. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, but I suppose my point is, I think sometimes blows, as you said, and people listening to this podcast, half the reason they listen to it is they're like, oh, I loved it when I heard this person talk about when they had their setback and it helped me. And I think actually sometimes a blow, figuratively, allows you to burn the whole thing down. To partially your point. By God, it welded us as a team. That's what I mean. Yeah. So that's what I was trying to kind of tease out. Is it's not necessarily the what was it? There was something I was reading where people there was the sense of community and optimism was actually super high during like World War II, because there was this collectivism of like, we're getting bombed, we need to be a bit like COVID. Everyone was like closer together in COVID. I think after 9/11, people in America, everyone had a flag out. They were they've never been more united.
I am sure.
How did you galvanise as a team that couldn't have happened without the fire?
Well, I think because Dave and Kevin had to spend so much time in my dining room with me, which they wouldn't have done normally, because Dave would have been in the kitchen, and whereas we might have spent an hour or half an hour together on spending 8 hours, that we had to make some formative decisions together. Though Dave is a highly intelligent, able chap, and he too saw that he needed to brave face this with the team to some extent. I don't know, it just, in the face of adversity, it did weld us together. I don't want to over-egg that omelette, because we did do some changes in the team, and then, one of our major team players, a guy who has a key part in the strategy of the business, because he's now head chef, Carl Green, came along. He may have come along anyway.
Yeah.
Or probably will, according to him.
And then what do you think, because I know we talked, even when we were having lunch earlier, you talked about, Dave being incredibly stoic and sticking with you. But as I said there's no, I was going to say there's no smoke without fire, but that's the worst thing to say there. But what I mean...
That's a poor joke.
Yeah, poor joke, sorry.
Yeah.
But what I was meaning to say is, like, there was something that pulled him to you and the unruly vision. What, I don't know, could you describe what you think that was?
You see, that's always been, I think, to the outside observer. So let's try and put some flesh on that.
Yeah.
So there's this lawyer, as he would say, more politely than this, by the way, he would say, who thought he knew a bit about food because he'd had the opportunity to eat in a few fancy dandy restaurants in the course of entertaining his clients and life generally, because he was a bit of a bon viveur. So he thought he was obsessed about food, thought he knew, in fact, he knew absolute Fanny Adams about the mechanics of running a restaurant.
That's what I mean.
The economics of running... and what was involved, and the culture of running a restaurant, because that is very different to my former life. And it never ceases to amaze me when I'm reflecting, like I am now, about, put yourself in Dave Wall's shoe. You're an extremely accomplished chef, having worked for some of the best in the UK, Gordon Ramsay, by Bend, etc. And there's this mad hatter who thinks he can run a bloody restaurant because he's had a vague interest. Oh, I want to run a restaurant. And he came for interview. He said, well, I allowed 2 hours. My wife was bawling at me on the phone after 4 hours. And where the bloody hell am I? Because we were still chatting away at 4 hours. I don't know. I think he may have at least seen some passion. He may have seen that I had a little bit of business acumen, i.e., although I was a lawyer, I was principally running a product or a business, and it was all about where's the margin, what's the return, man management, market positioning, where's your strategy, etc., where's your differentiator. And he might have seen that, well, there's somebody there. But also, I think what really sold it to him was that I said, look, I want to set the philosophy for the restaurant, which is Britalian food, i.e., fresh seasonal British food with an Italian influence. But then it's over to you, and I would like to have a right of veto over the food. I've never exercised that right. I haven't had to. But I think the fact that he was going to have autonomy, de facto autonomy in the kitchen, was very, well, he's told me it's very powerful and motivating for him. And for he and Carl, I mostly don't interfere. And in the tasting process, we have 3 rounds of tasting for each dish, and I'll express a view. We have a very transparent relationship. I don't hesitate to say, look, that's not for me. And the deal is, if I'm outvoted by the Jackie, the general manager, other managers, then I say, just run with it. And I have to tell you, almost always, Dave Waller's right. His instinct, I say, what's your conviction rate on this one? I'm not sure about this. And do you know what? Often he'll say, because he's that sort of chap, and Carl's exactly the same, yeah, you might have a point. You might have a point. But I do like this sort of collective input where he is receptive. Because my understanding, Dan, forgive me, you chefs out there, that many chefs would not be that receptive to group input into their work of art. Dave and Carl are, and always have been, and it's the way we've always operated. And I like to say to him, if I'm really not sure, I say, what's your conviction rate on this, Dave? Well, it's at least 8 out of 10. I said, go with it. He's almost always right. I can't think of a dish where I had a reservation and it didn't go well. But he's very nimble on his feet. He's not afraid after he's done it and he's gone through all the development process, which is long-winded, and then the tasting process. If after 2 weeks he's not feeling right, he'll either alter it or pull it.
So Britalian.
Yeah.
I read that on the website. I love that as a concept. That's the end point. And what we'll do to kind of explore this is we'll pick a dish that really kind of exemplifies what Britalian food is and how you're doing it at the Unruly Pig. But like first, let's zoom out and kind of go into the backstory of where you're. As you said, you loved your food. You're working as a lawyer, kind of not gallivanting around, as we said earlier, but like you were going to different restaurants and you were having, albeit potentially entertaining quite boring people. But
that's the truth. Oops. I'm sure they were bored with me too.
Yeah. It's a two-way street. Yeah. But then, so how did you get into Britalian? Like, where did that? Okay. What pulled you to that out of everything?
I get it. The Brits can tend to fall into 3 categories. I'm embarrassed that I don't know what the equivalent of Italophile is for Spain, but it's either Spanish cooking, but they tend to be either Italophiles or Francophiles, and sometimes there's a Venn diagram and they overlap. I've had this obsession with Italy since forever. We've been going every year for over 30 years, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a year. My kids love it. I love Italian food. I don't know. It's in my DNA. I like the way. I love the crazy driving. I love how they haven't destroyed their hill towns, etc. I love that. I just love their cuisine, and particularly how it varies so dramatically from region to region. The truth of the matter is that at my former firm, which was called Eversheds, there were many things that Eversheds did so well for me, and some of them was about teaching me how to, because I was clueless, financially manage, the importance of those things we mentioned earlier. And one of them was about having a differentiator. And they sent us away to school and stuff, and one of the outtakes was...
Sorry. So even that you're a lawyer, but they were telling you about marketing and differentiation?
Yes, absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, because you're fighting for market share, but
is that a differentiator for the clients you're representing, or for like your
for my product, the way that we were delivering a legal service?
Yep.
Needed ideally a differentiator, and it was for this adage which I came back from. They sent us away to business school, and it says, if you're the same as everybody else, you're going to be chased on price. I call it the fish and chips. Don't get me wrong, I'm no fish and chip shop. I love fish and chips. Love fish and chips. But the problem with serving fish and chips, like 92% of pubs in this country, by the way, I've pulled that figure out of the top of my head.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But, and we were in Southwold on Friday, and what did I have? Fish and chips. but the problem is they say, oh, you've charged £20 for fish and chips. I can go down the road and get it for 14. Whereas if you're delivering something different, then they tend to see that adds value, and it's very difficult to do the comparison. But if you're doing sticky toffee pudding, chocolate brownie, pork belly, chicken and chips, fish and chips, but inevitably there are price comparisons. So on a basic level, we needed to do something different. So I did some competitor research. It sounds very grandiose. It was just something else that talked, we used to do competitor research in my former job all the time, saying, well, what are we doing different? What are we doing better? Who else is doing better than us? Mm-hmm. Because if we can do it better, we can charge more, broadly. And in a competitive market where you're chasing margin, that's what you need in all businesses, but certainly in hospitality where the margins are challenging. And broadly speaking, I'm going to get this wrong, but within a 25-mile radius, I worked out that it was something like 70% or 80% of the pubs were serving 87% of the food, and it was variations on a theme of those things I've mentioned.
So sorry. So you're literally this is
when prior to opening.
Oh, sorry. So but the lesson was from the time at law.
Yeah, the time was at law because they taught me to do a competitor research and to search for a differentiator.
So did you went round the pubs around here?
Yeah, and I just looked. I thought, Christ, everyone is serving the same.
So what is the same on those menus? Let's say it's just
fish and chips, sticky toffee pudding, chocolate brownie, pork belly, duck spring roll, the usual suspects. So the baseline was I wanted to do something different. And then, but not now, there weren't many focusing on quality Italian. What I mean by that is, my second favourite dish in the world is spag bowl. But I don't mean spag bowl, but doing, if you like, Italian trattoria, cucina povera dishes, sort of focusing on the quality of the ingredients and letting them speak for themselves rather than over-stylized presentation. And also had this rather cliche obsession with the River Cafe because I've just cooked everything in all their books. And they focus on the quality of the ingredients, not over-stylized presentation, and let the ingredients speak for themselves. So back to basics, it was, what's going to be the differentiator? Well, if everybody else is doing that, we need to do something different. Let's do Italy because I love Italy. God bless him. Dave Wall had a classical French training, for God's sake. So this was a conversion therapy for him, thinking, not only is this guy off his rocker because he thinks he can run a restaurant, but now he's going to get me to cook Italian food, whereas for Ramsay Italia, he's been broadly doing variations in a theme of French quasi-British. But it's a conversion that, by God, he embraced, and with gusto. So that's where the Britalian thing is, because we do, Suffolk is chef heaven. The fresh and the quality ingredients you can get within 30 miles of here is extraordinary. So we wanted something that people were going to also want, because it's all very well this guy, this former lawyer, saying, well, we're going to do Britalian food because that's where I go on holiday, and therefore I'm going to shove that down your throat, Suffolk, and you're going to eat it. The Britalian bit is because you've actually got to give people also what they want. And as beautiful as a raviolo of cuttlefish in a lobster ragu might be, you just had
that's absolutely insane. Yeah.
Maybe that's not everyone's cup of tea, and so it was Britalian because we can still serve some of the best British food around, give it an Italian slant, make it slightly different, and different to the pack. So that's how it came about, and it seems to have worked.
Yeah, it's just it's genius in that the differentiation piece, because that's a universal rule.
Universal rule.
And that's what one of the things I was going to ask you, but you kind of got there before me, is what are some of the lessons you took from law that set you up for success?
And Matt and Dave and Carl and Jackie, the general manager, will be laughing their socks off when they make this next point. And man management, and they'll say, "Man management, you're crap at man management." But the importance of that, financial management, managing the margins, setting your differentiator, setting where you're going to sit in the market. Are you mid-market, up-market, in between the two? Those are important things, and you can have the poshest restaurant in the world, and my predecessor was a fabulous restaurant serving really high-end food, It didn't make any money.
Why would they say you're a crap manager? Just out of hilarity here, because
No.
I mean,
Because I'm irascible.
Irascible. What does that mean?
I'm up and down.
Okay, yes.
Or I have an unreasonable response, crotchety old git. That Dave would say rightly, when I get somebody in my sights, instead of sort of backing off and trying to see an objective picture, I want to fire the gun. He would say that, and this is. When
you say fire the gun, is that a bollocking or is that?
Well, it might be a bollocking, but it might be a sacking. No, I don't. It sounds as if I'm some sort of fascist. No, it wouldn't. I mean, we've just been through this recently. That I would like to think we have a very fair approach, and there are several occasions recently where an act of gross misconduct hasn't resulted in sacking. But what he would say is, and this is wholly reasonable, I'm too emotional. And often you need a bit to be dispassionate in these things.
But then, just playing devil's advocate here, the emotion and seeing that when the fire burnt down your dream, that emotion is ultimately what's got him here. One of the reasons. So I think it's a lot of founders I interview, the vision and idea and dream needs emotion to keep that thing going. That's what pulls people in. So I think it's not necessarily. Okay. It's like a strength and a weakness, maybe.
Yeah, strength and weakness. Let's accept that. I mean, I think both of them certainly saw my passion. Carl said something to me recently, and it was really nice. He said, "You're like my second dad. You bloody nagged the hell out of me," and all of that. And that, I don't know. I think why it has worked is that we've been extremely lucky. I happen to really like the boys, and they do think I'm an old git and I'm wrong and unreasonable at times, but I think we do get on and we like each other very much, and I've never worked with anybody nicer.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then Britalian.
Yeah.
What's the dish when you're in this gestation period of the business where you've just thought, fuck me, that's it. That's the unruly pig. Is it? I don't know, maybe not a specific dish, but what was that moment like?
You had a little whirl around our octopus dish today. It's not that octopus dish, though. I happen to think this iteration of it is probably the best with the anchovy emulsion. It's a stonkaroonie. Early doors, Dave won a number of prizes and accolades for his octopus dish, which octopus not particularly Italian, but it's certainly Mediterranean, but you get a lot of octopus in it. But he served it with tortelloni of andouille and all sorts of other stuff. That was the one, and squid ink, and that was the one where I think you've got a little bit of Britain, you've got a little bit of Mediterranean, you've got a lot of Italian, and that's the one that sticks in my mind, is that was very firmly imprinting his identity onto. We're accessible. We're deliberately accessible. We are a pub. I'm proud to be a pub, and therefore we do steak and chips. Perhaps a better example is that the steak is rare breeds or organic Hereford Angus cross, but it's tagliata, so it's sliced. And it's served with wonderful onion puree, but also really stonkingly good Parmesan chips. And no, that's not chips with a load of Parmesan chucked on top. It's they strip the potato with a potato peeler. They season it in between, put a little bit of Parmesan. They put it on weights overnight to extract the water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's deep fried, so you get all this crispness, but with the layers, and then a shitload of Parmesan, aged Parmesan on top. That's probably the best example of. So an accessible dish, I can go and have steak and chips, but it's Britalian.
Yeah, that cuttlefish bolognese was wonderfully perplexing. But it just kind of, it sends your taste buds gallivanting around it
and great texturally.
Yeah, but so is that fish? Is that?
Yeah.
It's
cuttlefish. So it's those big fat squid things.
The mince is cuttlefish.
No. The meat is cuttlefish. Yes. So the bolognese is just the sauce. It's red wine and tomatoes, etc. But the meat is not meat. It's cuttlefish.
Yeah, it's crazy what that's doing.
But but it's cut cut really thin. So you think it's mimicking minced beef a la
it is,
bolognese.
but then it's got the fish flavour,
Yeah.
and then those things that they're like very al dente, aren't
Yeah,
they? Like,
yeah.
but,
And
it's just
it's genius. And the first, it only came on last week, and I went, "Wow, this is great."
yeah.
I love that.
What are some of the other dishes that over the 10 years have really
Oh Christ!
rung true to you?
Honestly, there are so many. I mean, he did a wonderful raviolo. I'm not sure I knew what a raviolo was. I mean, it
What's a
doesn't.
raviolo?
Well, thank you for asking that, because I was about to say.
Is it a ravioli?
Single ravioli. It's the singular form, because ravioli is a.
We're in the very wanky territory here.
Talk about. But I'm vaguely intended, but I had to think, what's a bloody ravioli? Well, funny enough, it's the singular of the plural. So ravioli of we were getting great guinea fowl from up the road in Norfolk, and he just thought, oh, it's too good to waste, and he did a lovely raviolo of guinea fowl, Norfolk guinea fowl, and he served it with various beets, as in beetroot.
Ooh,
yeah. I mean,
there's loads.
There's loads, but neither is he afraid to do a dish that is purely British. You saw today, not particularly Italian. I had the wild sea bass just caught off the coast here with Orford lobster. And a lovely lobster sauce. Well, it's not particularly Italian, but both dishes would be served in Italy. But that's just pure British food served locally from local. On the other hand, to contradict the point, you saw the little bowl that came on the side with lobster orzo. So the orzo is that little pasta and great texturally. So just when you think you've got a pure British dish, in fact, on the side there's that Italian little number.
Yeah, it's I'm just trying to think. Was the pork I had with the ham hock and the
that's quite British. I mean, do you know where that came from?
But that's just gorgeous.
Carlos, head chef Carl, he used to go around to his nana's, and she used to cook him gammon with parsley sauce, and he just loved it. He just loved it. And we got some of this middle white pork belly.
What's middle white? Is that
it's a type of pork, a type of pig, and he just wanted to replicate that in posher form. So you've got your lovely. You saw the crackling on the outside, served nicely pink. But fundamentally, that was his version of egg and gammon and parsley sauce. But it was a bit more sophisticated. But there's nothing Italian there.
It was gorgeous.
But also we're not purist about it all the time. We're very careful. We're about to go back to Iberico pork, because as great as the pork is around here, and it is the best in the UK, we've been serving various iterations of an Iberico pork dish, because it's fed on acorns, it's got a high fat content. Fat is where the flavour comes from. And as good as it was, Dave's saying, that's nice, but we're not getting the same quality of Iberico, and we're all about flavour. So we're going to move back to Iberico. Well, the slightly embarrassing thing about the brand is there's nothing Spanish in our Britalian, but we're pragmatic.
Yeah.
Better to serve the flavour and get the right ingredient than be purist, but do protect your identity.
Yeah, I like that. It's like a pragmatism. It's like planting your feet in the puddles of pragmatism in terms of not, because I think people can be too purist where it's like to the point that they're actually shackling themselves from.
Yeah.
And also if something tastes better, then surely that's.
It's also like we want to obviously shop locally. We want our ingredients to come from local. I referred earlier as to how Suffolk is chef heaven, but he has an absolute rule. Dave and Carl have had this rule from day one. We won't go local just for going local's sake over the price of quality. So if we get about 70% of our goods within 39 miles, that's great, fantastic. But we're not afraid to say, well, that is going to come further afield because it just tastes bloody better. And that's epitomised by what I've just told you by Iberico, where embarrassingly the air miles are large coming from Spain. But hey-ho.
So what we were talking about earlier is how Michelin stars, like, 'cause I think what's interesting here is one of your learnings from law was you actually understood a business. And I think what we were saying, the place here before, what was, I don't know what, not to shout out.
It was called something else.
It was called something else, and amazing restaurant, and
Amazing
restaurant, did really, really well. And we were basically saying, whilst we were having lunch, is that a lot of these big celebrity chefs, they have their Michelin star as their flagship, but they'll actually make the money off the pub or the bistro, for example.
Yeah, it's by its nature, the standards, Michelin set a high standard. With that comes very high labour cost, because you're employing a large number of chefs at a skilled level, and that's difficult in itself these days. And therefore you're paying more. So you have high labour costs, you have high ingredient costs, because you're tending to serve, not always, it does, you've got various examples of Michelin stars who are selling, not serving turbot, but let's go with the turbot or the lobster, are serving high-end ingredients. It's a difficult gig to make money at Michelin. It's not impossible. There are obvious examples, many up and down the country. But I was rather taken, we were just briefly touched upon it at lunchtime, that, a very accomplished, lifelong restaurateur, David Moore at Pied à Terre in Fitzrovia, is just saying, look, I would like a staff buyout because the lease goes in about 5 years and I just can't make any money at this, and it's very difficult. And that's because of change, COVID dynamics, massively increased costs, energy costs, labour costs, food costs, whatever. But what one does see, and my analysis is very shallow because you can cite an example to suit whatever case you want to put forward, but what I do see is a number of high-profile chefs opening either bistros or gastropubs because, to say it's easier to make money, Jesus Christ, I think my team would crown me. But those developments, I think, may speak for themselves, that it's very difficult indeed to make money at a Michelin unless you are packed lunch and dinner every day. And once, but doing something like the Unruly Pig, I mean, we're doing 36,000, 40,000 covers a year. So I think some chefs would say it's very difficult to deliver really high-end quality with those numbers. Christ knows how those magicians do it, but they do.
What, as in the Michelin people?
No. I mean, it's just that we would do those numbers a year. So let's go to Saturday night. So typically we.
What would a bistro do a year? But I know we're kind of plucking. Numbers
because the bistros tend to be higher volume. Let me put some flesh in. Your typical Michelin restaurant on a Saturday night probably does 45 to 60.
Right.
We do 100 to 120.
Right.
Now, with that comes, it's a difficult gig if you're producing high-end quality food with quasi-Michelin expectations. I hesitate to say that, but you get my drift. But my point being, we're getting over 100 covers on a Saturday. That's 100 average spend per heads, whereas in a Michelin, they're getting, say, 40 to 60, albeit they're charging probably double. Yeah. I've never run a Michelin restaurant. I don't know. Dave will be giggling his pants off now, saying he doesn't know what he's talking about again. Look, he's bullshitting. But broadly speaking, even those that charge at a higher rate, my understanding is
the volume's not there.
The volume isn't there necessarily because volume and Michelin quality sometimes don't go together automatically. Not always. There are notable exceptions. But it's really hard. But basically, your Michelin requires a level of staffing and a level of skill that's really expensive, and often a quality of ingredient that's also very expensive. That means it's very difficult to make lots of money.
I was listening to a podcast, completely tangential here, but a podcast about how Porsche became successful.
Right.
Really interesting. And they basically, it's called Acquired. They'll go into all the companies. So they did Nike, they've done Uber, they go right into the details, and it's sort of 3-4 hour podcast episodes. But they were talking about the gross margin of BMW versus Porsche versus Ferrari.
Right.
And I think BMW was, these numbers are off, but it's ballparks. I think BMW is about 30%, but the volume's super high. Ferrari is I think they put a 50% markup on. Again, the volume's tiny. Whereas Porsche are really clever because they're in that sweet spot where they've got much higher margin than BMW, but they've got but the volume's still there, but it's still premium.
But that's high margin.
Yeah, so I think that's the art, isn't it?
That's the art, and there are people who are much more adept at that. If you look at somewhere like Hyde in London, I don't know what the covers are, but there's a lot. So it can be done, but it requires a very slick operation and a lot of investment, and for many, it's difficult.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is a Porsche, this restaurant by any stretch, but like it seems like you've got that balance in terms of the volume and the quality. You're voted the best pub in the UK.
Yeah.
That food I had for lunch was, I think, fucking better than some of the Michelin star restaurants I've been to. Absolutely stunning, and I think you could easily win a star.
Very cool.
But what is the art of getting those numbers right? Do you think, from what you know?
Well, it's a constant battle, and we've evolved, and we've cut those numbers, and we've when we started out, I mean, my God, we made so many mistakes, and we're back to where we came in. I mean, Dave went through hell. I ended up putting him through hell unintentionally. We had a far too big a menu, and we were just pushing through the numbers, and we weren't controlling flow and etc. So.
Controlling flow
of customers. It was almost like the customer arrives, let's take the order. Well, hang on, the kitchen's already got 8 tables. I want to just store them a little bit, and get them a bit. Oh, fuck that! No.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't say fuck that.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
But it was just ignorance and stupidity, and I look back with embarrassment. But that's what. But over the years, I have to say, it's Dave and Carl being right again, saying, look, we can't be all things to all people. I get you want it to be an accessible pub, but Dave has always led the charge on reducing the menu whilst trying to keep it offering as big a choice as we can, because it was a painful lesson for me, because I think, Christ, but it's so obvious now. If you have a more limited offering, it enables you to achieve better rate of consistency of delivery, because it's self-evident, really, isn't it? But the poor chap, he had to fight a bit on that one, and so over the years we have cut and doing less has become more, but you still get a customer, increasingly less, but you're coming in, oh, there's nothing on this menu I can eat, you've only got 6 main courses, But sometimes because you want to build a business and you want to try and keep the customers happy, and you don't want to be in the position of my predecessor and not making money, the temptation was trying to be, well, we can do that, but we can do a burger. Well, Dave doesn't want to cook a burger. Oh, don't get me wrong, who doesn't love a burger? It's everyone's guilty pleasure. But we used to have a burger. It was a really nice burger with, it was a glorious burger, in fact. But over the years, we've cut that back, and we've cut our covers back, because we've understood. I mean, Dave was always on this mantra, and he was right, that you just cut back a little, less will be more, because you'll achieve a better quality and you'll have overall happier customers, and of course that will mean that the choice is more limited, and you can't keep all the people happy all the time.
So are you focused on repeat custom, or
yes.
Both?
I mean, we're very lucky because the Australia Dam top 50 gastropubs is a great thing, and all of us are in the whether it be the national restaurants or the gastropub list will say the same thing. They do bring food tourists, and we do get people travelling down from Leeds to eat with us because we're the number one gastropub. But we are heavily reliant upon and proud of the fact that the majority of our clientele are from Suffolk or have a Suffolk home. So the truth is, our proximity to London means there's a heavy amount of second home owners here. Down the road in Orford, 58% own second homes. I think it's higher in Albury up the road. And so our main catchment is East Anglia, Suffolk in particular, but at the weekends very much London. But we do get some numbers travelling to us. I wouldn't want to over-egg that on it. Are they coming in the thousands from the Orkney Isles? Of course they aren't. But we do get occasional surprises. We do get people coming from North London, for example, midweek, which is a joy. And that's the joy of this list and what it has done for us, the Gastropub list and latterly the restaurant awards.
And you said there's like painful, obvious kind of truisms or principles, and what I think the one was like, less is more.
Yeah.
But I think it's so easy to pull those out retrospectively. I mean, I'd have that with this.
Well, hindsight's
it's
gloriously exact, isn't it?
It's like, so go back, I think when we were having lunch, you were saying that, you were first in, last out, and I kind of love, why I love your story, Brennan, is you've taken that naivety, you've just jumped into your dream and like thought, say that the dream's a wave, you just thought, right, I'm going to surf this no matter which way it goes. But now when you look back on those first year, or like after the pub was, after you got back on your feet after the fire, what are some of the obvious lessons, like the kind of obvious truths that you kind of wish which are kind of obvious now?
God, there are so many. I think I've covered the main ones off, which was, for goodness sake, do less and build rather than the reverse, which we did, i.e. in terms of menu size. Be bold, be bolder. Because I don't, because I said to Dave, we need to be accessible. I'm shit scared of not making any money. My predecessor made that mistake. And yet, fitting our burger. I mean, this sounds like burger, not the burger. I mean, if they pointed out, I love burgers, and the Unruly Pig burger was exceptional. Gorgonzola mayonnaise, brioche, and all that. But I wish I'd sort of said, look, actually, my predecessor may not have made any money for a variety of reasons, and it wasn't necessarily the length of the menu or what was on it. And the other thing would be that I should have investigated and understood the gig more. And what I mean by that, one of our earliest difficulties was the inability to control flow on a Saturday night when we were turning tables. And in those early years, I used to call it the F1 pit stop team. I mean, it was a ridiculous situation we got ourselves into. I hasten to add, not promulgated by the kitchen, but, I couldn't go home on a Saturday night before 8:30 because the crucial turns at 7:30 to 8. That's when people turn.
Wait, so sorry, I'm just trying to, for someone who's not in the industry. No, this is my job. But
if you come in at 6 o'clock, your table's probably turning at 8. If you come in at 5:30, your table's probably turning at 7:30. Once you've arrived at 8 o'clock, that table isn't turning. But crucial to the economic success is to turn as many tables as you can.
Right.
And if you do that, that would enable you to do the 125, 135 we were doing at some point covers on a Saturday night. But because we weren't controlling the flow, and we, plural, equally to blame, so we would sit people down. We wouldn't be sufficiently on it. Right, they've arrived late, so can we just manage expectation? We've got a problem coming up on table 4 here. They're only just getting to their dessert. That means their table's not going to be ready on it. We've just slammed the kitchen with 20 orders in 10 minutes. What the hell did we do that for? That's inevitably going to pull them down. Instead of actually having a complete grip and flow on making up the jigsaw of how you turn tables and managing, right, we'll just say to them they've arrived half an hour late, say we can't take their table now until X, but also making sure that you don't overload the kitchen. It may sound very obvious.
Yeah, but this is the dance, isn't it?
This is the dance.
Yeah.
But so obvious that Mr. Smart Lawyer here, I didn't get it. And my restaurant manager then, sorry, let's not go there, but that would be the biggest thing I'd do differently would be to say, right, we are not going for these big numbers early. We are going to have a very slow build as opposed to what was just a soft opening and then bang. What a mistake. 2, we would have less on the menu, and 3, we'd have somebody who understands how to control flow, because otherwise that kitchen's going to sink. And it seems so damn obvious now, it's embarrassing.
I love it. And how did you control the flow?
Oh Jesus! No, I don't think it was me, because
But like, what
Dave would be laughing. It wasn't him. He was clueless. He was bloody clueless. Oh, for Christ's sake, look at him!
You sat at the bar having a glass of wine.
Listen to him pontificating about as if he was bloody Gordon Ramsay or so.
Well, how did the
Well, we used to sit down. We're always one of the things. We have some key values in the business which we try to adhere to. Easier said than done, but one of them is being very straightforward. So we don't pull punches, and in the management team, and it would always be, what the hell is going wrong? And we would then say, right, I don't want you to book tables 1 to 4, because we're going to have those as holding tables. We're going to know where to hold people. We try various things. What actually happened was this, that I had a number of excellent restaurant managers who really did a sterling job in the face of adversity of a new business. But we just had a particular manager came in, and he was used to a volume high-end operation. And therefore he was, right, well, we're blocking out that particular 7:45 slot. No one's booking there, so we're creating a barrier. I will tell you when you can take an order. You're to tell me when customers are getting itchy. It wasn't rocket science, but it really is a bit of an art. And anybody who's a restaurant manager or a chef will know. They'll know when there's an operator who can do this, and it's easier said than done. All I can tell you is that we developed into a business that the F1 pit stop team, I mean, literally, there would be 4 of us. Right, Christ, they've arrived. Keep them chatting. Right, you do the chair, I'll do the cutlery. And it was like that. I mean, it's ludicrous. So it's just one of those things that, in hindsight, I now understand. But I wasn't equipped to do it. If I'd spent, this is my 10th year in hospitality. Now I think I could do it. Don't laugh, chaps. But I didn't understand how to do it, even though it wasn't rocket science. It was more intuitive.
Yeah. I believe naivety is momentum. Like, if you're not naive, you're kind of. Let's talk about we've talked about the food. We talked about Britalian. I think one of the things that striked me, and this Osh has the same at the Devonshire. They've got that room at the back, which is just kind of plastered with all this gorgeous, like, esoteric art, and obviously, I've walked in. There's mad art everywhere. Talk me through some of your favorite, like.
I love that you call it mad art. That is the biggest compliment we've ever received. Was he said, I think it was Australia said the personality of the owner is reflected in the pub, and I think that was intended as a compliment. And then they say Brendan's a bit quirky. Yeah, I'll take that. I'm quirky.
So okay, in fact, I was meaning to ask you this. Like, why does unruly speak to your soul? Like, how are you unruly as a person?
I am a bit. Okay, my brothers would say I was the SWAT, which I was.
What's the SWAT?
SWAT was I was very scholarly.
Right.
They would be out playing footy, and I'd be studying, and I would. He let the family down by going to university. I remember my older brother doing that. I mean, he ended up getting a master's degree, for Christ's sake. But anyway, whilst I've been quite straight in the sense of boring in that sense, I used to. I mean, it sounds very modest. I was more scholarly than some, just put it that way. So there is this straight and sensible part, and inherent in being a lawyer, for God's sake, there are bent lawyers, I know. But you have to have a modicum of sense and sensibility and reasonableness and rationality about you. But there's always been this streak where I just love a great giggle, and I love things that are unruly. I find it very humorous when somebody says something out of the ordinary. I like wacky, and we had to come up with the name for the Unruly Pig, and of course I was going to call it the Pig because I wanted something that reflected something down to earth, that spoke of Suffolk provenance. We know, I think we're the biggest pig rearing county in the kingdom, and And then Robin Hudson opened his first pig hotel down at Brockenhurst just as we were about to open.
Oh, did that start in 2015?
Yeah, I think so. Or he declared it. And so I had to come up with something different. And we were just a bunch of friends getting slowly drunk at a dinner party. And, well, what do you want? What are you trying to... Well, I want to convey somewhere that's a bit down to earth and a sense of fun and giggliness. And I'd quite like to retain the pig. And it was a friend called Alison Barter, and she said, what about an unruly pig? And I thought it was very different. Coming back to differentiators, there isn't an unruly pig in the UK. And I really loved the idea of running an unruly house. Not in the sense of, there's prostitutes upstairs and all of that, but I liked that sort of zaniness. And my friends who know me will say, well, he's always had a little bit about it, but fundamentally he's sensible, but there is that edge to him. So that's how the name came about, and that's... I like the unruly aspect of it, and that's reflected in some of the art. It is unruly.
Yeah, it's almost like you were so ruly working in law.
Yeah,
and then it's almost like
right.
the
I never thought about it.
No. You were so
right.
ruly in law that then as you said, crossed the chasm to your dream. It's like almost the antithesis to that is unruly, and the pig is the down to earth, and. Yeah, because I mean this in a compliment. Like that, if you told me that when you said, "Oh, I was like a lawyer most of my life," I wouldn't think that because you're quite like.
Thank you. That's a compliment.
But I suppose, my brother, like he's a
lawyer.
He's a lawyer, but he's on his way back from Glastonbury and he's probably been off his head for 5 days.
Yeah.
He's got that streak in him. I wouldn't say he's like.
Well, then I'm like him.
Yeah. I wouldn't say he's like a. But then he loves.
I play hard.
Yeah, he knows how to play. Yeah, for sure.
I play hard. And Dave he'll be the first to say, "You're right, Brendan. Yeah, fine. Too much red wine last night."
Yeah, it's all us. And then so then with we got to the unruly part, but then with the art.
Yeah.
I said it's mad. You said it's wacky.
It's eclectic, certainly.
Eclectic, yeah. So because. I think it's a bit of a not necessarily juxtaposition, but when I think of Italian restaurants, I know this is Britalian and it's a pub. I wouldn't necessarily associate all this wacky art.
No, you wouldn't. No.
And that's where again it kind of why I love speaking to people who have these amazing restaurants is because it's just a lot of the time it's lots of things clashing together. But like I said, Osh said it's a British pub with a Irish accent.
Yes.
This is Britalian. That's your kind of. I was going to say je ne sais quoi, but it's not that.
Yeah,
but
the Italian
fuck knows. Yeah. Delissimo. We'll go with that. But talk to me about how you began to bring the whole feeling together inside and the ambience.
Yeah, that was. I've always collected art from a very early age, which makes me sound really even more boring, but I don't know, we all have our passions, but I always have, and even when...
What was the earliest thing you remember collecting, and how old?
Well, I was on receipt of housing benefit, God help us, the Daily Mail's going to say, well, he's an example of a dole waller who should never have got that dole in the first place, but we were paid so poorly when I was in what was called then articles, but it's now called training contract to be a solicitor. That's 2 years. I was paid so poorly that I was allowed my income to be supplemented by getting housing benefit. And I'd rather save up some of that and spend it on a piece of art, which I did, than spend it on, I don't know, maybe going out and getting pissed on a Friday night. I certainly did that too. But so I don't know, I've always collected that. And it has always been different and wacky. And if I love a piece, I'll just go for it. And occasionally when things got a little bit better, and if I saw something at auction, I would, I'd just go for it because I'd love it. So there was always that. And I wanted, as part of the differentiation process, not to put, however cliche this may sound and make people throw, I don't want, men in red coats with hunting horns and dogs and which tends to be associated with country pubs. And there's a particular artist around here who's well known and shall remain nameless. And, that artist is in 4 pubs that I can name you. So I wanted something. So all I did was buy some stuff at auction, brought a load from home, and I still rotate from home, and then supplement it as and when. And it was a bit of an imposition, really. It's almost egotistical to impose your taste upon the general public, but they seem to like it. It's certainly a talking point. It's certainly controversial. I mean, in the loos, like you went to the upstairs loos, but downstairs in down the main loos, Jensen, there's Chinese propaganda art. I just happened to buy it up the road at the auction at Campsie Ash, and there are 10 original propaganda pieces from Mao Zedong. But, I get all sorts of shit for that. I get people coming in and say, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, inculcating the cult of Mao in your pub. I think, do you think I'm inculcating the cult of Mao by putting it in the bloody pisser, for Christ's sake? But I do get that. But it produces, I had a letter from a lady in Lowestoft who said that I should be ashamed of myself. There's a bit of a theme there. I get... because we saw that picture of Johnny Rotten, and she said,
"Where's that? I haven't seen."
Well, it's on the entrance, and he's got and he's like this
Lego pieces.
But no, the Lego pieces are cool. The Lego pieces, they're cool. They're from an artist in Bury St Edmund. Anyway, there's Johnny Rotten. I'll show you on the way out, and he's on a cross he's got a help, and it is a bit irreligious. Okay, I mean, I was reared a Catholic. My mother would be ashamed. I no longer go to mass. God bless you, Mum, but. So I don't deliberately insult anybody who happens to be a Christian, but she wrote to me saying, you ought to be ashamed of myself because I was taking the name of the Lord, her God, in vain, and it was absolutely outrageous. They had Johnny Rotten on a cross mimicking Christ. I hadn't really thought about it, and I'm not just saying that defensively. I wrote back, look, the last thing I want to do is insult you. I'm sorry you've taken offence. No offence is meant, but the job of art is to provoke. And even His Holiness, the Pope, in the Vatican art collection, has some really controversial parody art. The Bacon parody of Pope Pius VI, and it's really grotesque stuff. And she wrote back and said, she had another go at me. She said, "What's that got to do with it? It's a disgrace." So it doesn't produce it, but it's a bit like the name. When we first opened, 50% liked it and 50% hated it. But they were all talking about it, and I never. The first piece of feedback was on Facebook, I used to be really sensitized to the feedback via TripAdvisor or ShitAdvisor, as Giles Corrin calls it. But somebody went on Facebook and said, "The Unruly Pig, the name suits him."
Oh, fuck off.
My wife said, well, they might have a point.
You're the unruly pig.
Yeah. No, I get people coming up and say, "Are you the unruly pig?" I said, well, I am.
You said art provokes. I love that. And I think that what I'm picking up literally live now and after having lunch here is it does provoke a feeling, and I think you said giggliness is the word. It's almost that it has those things that kind of tweak you ever so slightly. So when I walked in the Lego thing, which was, I was like, again, it's just played with my semiotics of what a pub should be. I'm like, well, this looks like pub to me. I'm going in, there's a guy at the front to say hello to me, greet me. Oh, hang on a sec, there's a Johnny Rotten on a cross. Obviously I didn't see that, but then Johnny Rotten on a cross, and there's this massive Lego wall with all these weird quirky things, and it provokes that feeling of something.
Yeah, well, I would like to hope the intention is to provoke a sense of fun.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, is what's the...
A sense of fun and a sense of difference, and people will look at that one over there, which sadly your podcasters won't see, but I mean, he's got a detached head and he looks a bit surreal, but...
I might get a picture of it. I can slide it in,
It's funky.
Yeah.
And different, and thinking, what the hell is that? And I like that.
And I suppose that's the sort of, that epitomises what you'd want.
It is unruly, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's also like, it's bending.
Yeah.
You want to bend with the rules.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about, and I can't find it, but I read somewhere in one of the interviews you did that you've got like an obsession with castles.
Christ, I have. Where did you find?
I have. Yeah. So I read.
Jesus.
But there's a castle in Wales you went to go and see when you were about 10 years old. Conway.
Yeah, I remember to this day.
Yeah,
the first time I saw it, and we turned the corner, and when you're going over the North Wales Expressway, and you turn and you go into the town, and there's a point where you're suddenly confronted with this massive Edwardian castle, and I remember saying to my mum and dad, "Wow."
What's so Edwardian castle? When's
Edwardian first? So it's sort of, Jesus, the historians are going to say no, I'm wrong. I think it's 1100 to 1200, or is it 1200 to 1300? Yeah, they're a big thing in North Wales, not exclusively North Wales. And but I was brought up near Wrexham, and within 80 miles, 90 miles, there are four extraordinary Edwardian castles: Harlech, Beaumaris, Carnarvon, and Conwy. And it was part of the massive building program to suppress the Welsh in the day.
So that's what. Yeah, I was going to say. Why were all these? So these were English castles
English
in
castles.
Wales.
It was part of
And it was-
containment of the rebellious Welsh, and
So Conway was a English castle.
yeah, built by Edward the
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, why do some people like motor racing, or something gripped me at an early age. And I was a bit, that comes back. My brothers just thought, "You're weird, mate. You like castles." But and the time when Tutankhamun, the first Tutankhamun exhibition came to Britain,
Who's
Tutankhamun? As in the gold mask from the Egyptian Museum, the famous pharaoh. He came to Britain in 1969, and the queues were around the block at the British.
He was an actual guy.
No. He was at the Howard Carter in the Tomb of the Kings. Found Tutankhamun's tomb intact, and it's a treasure house. And there's a gold mask, which is and
It's like the pharaoh.
yes, the pharaoh, and
yeah.
that came to Britain. Well, I asked my dad to take me to the British Museum. We were living in Kent at the time, and most people say, "But you were 8." Yeah, I know. I can't help it. I've always been fascinated by history, and when my youngest kid was born, 2 days afterwards, I knew I had to get out of the law. I never did until 54, but. So I started another degree at UEA. We were living in Norwich, and I started doing this history degree because I thought, I hate the law. I've just got to get out. What am I going to do? Christ knows. I've got 2 kids to bring up. But anyway, I started history, and you had to do a dissertation on the thing. I'm like, yeah. What do I write about? Castles. I don't know.
It's mad. I don't
know where you got that.
I love linking things together, but like this is connecting the dots. But I think Steve Jobs has got a quote, which is you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And it's almost like this is your castle. In some respect. I don't mean it in like you're the.
No.
But I don't mean it like that in terms of like you're the kind of messiah like running it. But that's like your.
Maybe I don't know. That's probably stretching. I don't know. Well, I'm staggered. You know that.
Well, no, I didn't. To be fair, I just.
I've been blabbing to. I must have been particularly drunk.
No, I don't know. Yeah, but then, what did you out of all the history periods? Like, what really, like, because I find it fascinating as well. What periods do you think? This is not really about the restaurant. It's just, as I said, like we'll scatter around.
Yeah.
Like, what are the periods that really intrigued you? Because I think what I like about history is you can learn a lot about. Humanity, and I think someone's got history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and I think it's like.
Well, Henry S. Ford said all history is bunk, and he couldn't have been more wrong because you've just said history repeats itself, and it's so relevant. If I had my way, thank God I'm not in charge of the country. I'd have everybody doing history compulsory because history repeats itself profoundly. And to your question. The period I find most fascinating is the early modern period, which is 1832 through to 1939. And I find that the most fascinating because it was a period of social upheaval in Britain. Firstly, we had a middle class for the first time through industrialization. Yeah. There was a move from the country to industrialization because of the Industrial Revolution. It was a movement of social change because... in 1832, they it began the journey to universal suffrage. It just took a little time to get there in the 1920s for the women. Was it the 1920s? You saw great wars. You saw great upheaval in France. You saw Germany destabilized.
What was the upheaval in France?
Well, they were always doing. Were they going to be a republic or were they not going to be a republic? And the reinstallation of the monarchy, etc. You then have you moving into the Franco-Prussian War, leading into the 1914-18 war, the Great War to end all wars. That wasn't. and then of course the build-up of Hitler, and I don't want to over egg this omelette either, but I Hitler gained power via democracy. He was voted chancellor through demagoguery, and you see these are it's really interesting times. Look what happened yesterday in France. You've got a right-wing national party that was founded fundamentally as a fascist party that looks it's going to be the largest voted for party. And people say, well, it's fine, they've changed the colours. They may have. But look what happened in the biggest democracy in the world, the leader of the Western world, with Trump. And he egged on supporters to siege the Capitol and to try and overturn the democratically elected result of the last election. Democracy is a fragile thing, and to your question, why I found that period the most fascinating is because in this country, not as opposed to in Greece, that's when it evolved. And I think one needs to keep a very careful tab on history, because people think democracy is enshrined and nobody could ever alter it. Well, you can see even within Europe, the Prime Minister of Hungary, his suppression of the press, until recently, Poland's suppression of the judiciary.
What's he doing to the press?
Oh, well, he controls the press. He's introduced really repressive press laws. The previous government, there's a great government now in Poland, but the previous government were booting out the judiciary. And once the government interferes with the judiciary and you're controlling the law, then that's a very dangerous role, because you're fundamentally on the road to closed trials, just like show trials, because you're appointing your men to deliver the result that you want. Anyway, how have I drifted onto that?
No, it's fine. I find it interesting because I think what we were saying is history. What I like about history, there's a book called by Will Durant, which is it's called The Lessons of History, and it's basically, he does it in like 100. It's like a 100-page book. And actually, linking this all back together, there's a point in there in which was a universal law is the point of differentiation, and he talks about that in the book. And literally, you could read the book like that. And it's really, really interesting. It goes through every single period, but one universal law is like differentiation, and that is, as we said, history doesn't repeat itself. It sometimes rhymes. Sorry, can repeat itself and can rhyme. What would you say are some other lessons that we should that do repeat themselves too much in history, do you think? Because as you said, that's your favourite period, but have you looked at other periods as well?
Yeah, but I think the truisms apply in other periods. That the truism of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that goes to the maintenance of a democracy. I mean, people look at the whole Brexit debate and put on one side what is now almost near universally considered, safe, a disaster for the company economically and culturally. People forget it was only the EU led out of the economic, the coal and steel community created post-war. It was only in 1948 that we started forming the European Union. And one of the main reasons for its foundation was that Europe went to war with each other too often and regularly. And people of my era and younger would say, oh, we're not going to go to war. But who would have thought that Putin would have invaded Ukraine? And we have this proxy war now. And I would say is never, ever overlook or underrate the mechanisms of peace, however ineffectual they are. The United Nations, some would say it's a busted flush. It is not terribly effective, but it has had some effect in controlling conflict. That we should be not afraid to go to war if necessary or intervene militarily for the greater good. Look what was done in Yugoslavia. It saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Now we have the Ukrainians fighting a proxy war on our behalf because we won't put the foot soldiers on the ground, and it's very well for me to say we should, but we are supplying all the weaponry when in the face of things you've got this belligerent dictator who's actually pushing and going, he was given an inch in Crimea, and now he's taking a mile. So never overlook the lesson to your question. Never overlook how important the mechanisms of maintenance of peace are, namely the United Nations, NATO. Look what Trump is threatening at the moment. It's a busted flush. And the European Union. And I know we're not a member of the European Union now, but don't ever look at the fact that there were so many other benefits to it. And one of them was that there was this political organisation which has assisted peace in Europe when Germany and France had been to war 3 times in the previous 70 years. But people forget that, he says.
No, but I think the bigger, where I was trying to kind of take that is there's truisms and principles that are kind of unwavering in times of everything. And I suppose if we look at the history of the last 10 years with this restaurant and pub, what would you say are some of the principles you have? And what I mean with this is you want your customers when they're here to have this feeling of giddiness and excitement or fun, like being unruly, being quirky, all of those things.
Great food in a relaxed setting.
Exactly, but I think a lot of pubs think that. But I think the quirky bits where it's really different, and especially with the food, what are the kind of principles you have that it comes from you, but ultimately it's your team who are delivering that. The values and stuff. I think you talked about the values. Like how do you codify that?
Only again, no rocket science at all. I mean, I've never thought about it as the answer. However, to your question, I think some of it would be about trying to adhere to our values. I said earlier that's easier said than done. You can set these values, and the key values, I think, are mutual respect, i.e. the cleaner and the kitchen porter is as important as the head chef, and people say, well, that's bollocks. No, but it isn't. It isn't. Because without either of the cleaner and the kitchen porter, we couldn't function, and they need to feel valued. If they feel valued, they are more likely to perform better and feel part of a team. If they feel part of a team, they will stay. The second key value is, so if they feel respected from top to bottom, then I think that's important in terms of our success. 2, what is equally important is a further value, which is continuous improvement. In the early days, absolutely not now, he's with it 100%. Both Carl Green and Dave Wall are. They would say, Christ, Brendan, we just get the thing running like a Swiss watch, and you up the bloody bar. I say, right, we're now going to improve even further. And that's because another thing that my firm taught me, and it's another key basic truism of business, unless you continuously improve, or try to, it's bloody hard, you'll be overtaken by the competition. Because all good products and ideas are copied. I'm sure we've copied ideas. Go, oh, that's a great idea. Did you see that low alcohol margarita in so-and-so? Yeah, that's a great idea. And whereas before, Dave would say, Christ, we've just got it operating and you're wanting us to get... Yes, we're unapologetic. And they've really embraced that culture now because, forgive this immodesty, I have seen the food in this place just go like that. And particularly over the last 5 years as they found their feet and there's been a serious focus on it. So mutual respect.
But how do you, this is out of sheer curiosity because you've got no background in as a chef.
Yeah.
When you're saying like, we've got to go up a level.
Yeah.
Like, how are you getting them to do that?
They do it. I mean, they do it.
So it's not with each individual dish.
Fundamentally it is. It's
Yeah.
about so.
It's not like you saying, "I tried that," and it needs to go up a bit, or like
but that's for that. Because both the look, the appearance, and what we're doing, and Dave has had a very conscious effort of. We talked about it earlier. Less is more, but it's sticking to 3 core flavors on a plate, for example, whereas we might have had 4 on there before, and it simplify, not complicate. There's nowhere to hide, of course, so you've got to get those 3 right. But that has been a conscious effort. I have not sat down ever with Dave Wall and said, now that dish is deficient. Well, I might have had this continuous, having set the bar and saying we've got to improve and improve and improve and get better, and whether it be down to how the managerial team dress.
how's that changed?
Well, it used to be. I don't want to introduce too much formality because the team are deliberately in jeans and trainers, but they have their bibs and whatever. The managerial team now will wear a suit. Now, that's not everyone's cup of tea, but at least it introduces a note of slight different. Well, that's not a difference. You can go into 100 pubs in London. But for us, that's a bit of a change. It's not a particularly great example, but a lot of this stuff is incremental, and it's been a conscious effort. And particularly in the kitchen, Carl he was holding forth on this eloquently recently, saying, the dishes they are producing now are of fundamentally different qualities to what they were producing 8 years ago. And that's how they found their feet, built their confidence, had faith in the team, and have been able to accompany them by reducing the menu, having better consistency, etc. So mutual respect, continuous improvement, and the other thing, which is a truism again, everyone talks about it, the all-importance of teamwork, because we spoke earlier about a front of house and kitchen divides, which can happen all too easily in restaurants. It's not a concept I understood. And there was a particular manager who came along and revolutionised that. And the one team thing, that cliche makes you want to throw, one team, one dream. But that became a reality, and is still a reality with Jackie, our general manager, because the relationship between front of house and the kitchen is one of trust and mutual support and frankness and openness and being very straightforward. But there's no longer what used to be. I mean, I could go in on a Saturday night and it would feel like you were in the Argentinian war, the exocets were flying.
I am absolutely over the bloody moon that Big Fish, yes, Big Fish, the big dons of Challenger Food and Drink brand design. I mean, Perry is an absolute legend. He's designed every Challenger brand in your cupboard. Charlie Bigham's, Goo, Tyrrell's, Rana, Clipper Tea, the list is endless. And Big Fish are looking to speak to the next wave of Challenger Food and Drink brands who are a force for good. They're looking to invest in brands, and we've got this sick thing coming next year that you do not want to miss out on. If you want to speak to Big Fish, if you want to go to the Fish Bowl, drop me a DM and I can make it happen. North Star, get listed, say listed, and grow. Do you actually know your shopper? If you don't know your shopper, you're literally pissing and spunking money up the wall. Knowing your shopper is the secret weapon to unlock more grocery listings and more stores. But not knowing your shopper is literally like driving in the dark, hungover, without a sat-nav, in a thunderstorm, in February with 5 miles of petrol in the tank. But knowing your shopper is like having a sat-nav. A full tank of petrol is a glorious sunny day. You're listening to the Sugar Babes and you've got a fresh, hot, pumpkin spice latte by your side. North Star Illuminator is the shopper map to the promised land of growth and success. It does 3 wonderful things for your brand. 1, make your marketing budget sweat. When you've got lucid, crystal clarity on exactly where each precious penny is going, you know how to drive loyalty with existing customers or even bring new shoppers into your brand. Numero 2, what's actually driving performance? Do you actually know why your sales are going up and down? You need to know, are you bringing new shoppers into the category? Is that driving growth? Are loyal customers buying more of your brand? Are shoppers switching in and out of your brand versus other brands? I mean, Perfect Head's a glorious example. They are bringing new shoppers into sports and energy. They are so incremental versus, say, chocolate bars, where people just switch in and out of brands all the time. The more you know this, the more oomph you've got with your buyer when you go to do a marketing plan, a joint business plan with retailers. The buyers want to know how incremental you are to the category. That is your passport to success. North Star is your passport. And what you can do is you can literally see it by channel, by retailer, get so specific. If you're looking to go to the next level, honestly, get in touch with North Star and go to the promised land. MKJ Ignite are a team of experienced recruiters who specialize in the challenger brand space. They recruit for over 50 brands, ranging from pre-revenue startups right through to some award-winning brands such as Real Superfoods and Purdian Fig. They recruit across all levels and all functions, so whether you're looking for a new salesperson, a new marketing whiz, or an ops guru, MKJ Ignite have got you covered. They're bloody good at what they do, trust me. So if you're looking to hire or you're looking for a new role, get in touch with MKJ Ignite. They won't let you down. Are you looking to turbocharge your brand, take it to another level, save money, save energy, save stress, save time? Well, I've got the perfect thing for you. I am delighted to announce that HC Brands, formerly HC Consulting, my boy Harry Clark, has just launched a commercial growth accelerator program designed specifically for challenger food and drink brands. You can upskill your commercial team. They've got so many modules, you can handpick them, we can do the full shebang. You're going to save hours of research, you're going to get the tools to turbocharge your growth, get better clarity on your brand's objectives and directions. And look, Harry's worked with some amazing brands, Holy Moly, Islands, Savile, and Rooted Drinks. He's really helped me with a strategy for Hungary. Yeah, if you're looking to turbocharge your brand, link in the show notes, and you're going to be able to do that easy peasy, lemon squeezy. What was, because I interviewed Rick Stein's son, Jack Stein.
Yes.
And there's a really, do you know a guy called Rory Sutherland? He's a...
The comedian?
No, well, he could be a comedian. He's hilarious. He's like the big advertising guy.
No, I don't.
But he says the best MBA is kitchen porter or working in a corner shop. The reason being is you understand, you see things from a complex system interacting with each other.
Right.
Versus individual parts.
Right.
So when you're a kitchen porter, you see the kitchen and the front of house and how they interact because you're the middle person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense. And he says, and he goes, whereas in business, for example, and he said that's the best MBA if you want to be an entrepreneur. Whereas through the school route, they force you to specialize, which means you don't see the full system. So from that linchpin kind of position, middle of the park position, you can see everything. And Jack Stein was saying that the kitchen porter, Rick Stein always paid them significantly, like higher than most other restaurants, and he was like he called them the all-seeing eye, and that they can see what's going on in the kitchen and they can feel the temperature.
Yeah, they can because it is palpable.
Yeah,
often.
It's palpable. They can feel the temperature, and they even had an example where they were trying to put in this new gutting, and the kitchen porter said, like, that's not even. Like, no one could see it because they were so in their myopic about I've got the ego, I'm doing this. He's like, that's completely off. So I'd love to know with yourself, Brendan, like, how did you, what's an example of it being off kilter the front and the back of house, and then how did you kind of rectify it? Because I just think that's so interesting as a art.
Well, the first point is I didn't rectify it. I tried my best, but my best wasn't good enough. I tried various things which I wouldn't bore you and your audience with. But can we not do this? Can we not do that? Can we do this? Can we keep those tables free? Can we stop orders of this? All of those things. I did not have the necessary insight or acumen. I might have now, but not then. I didn't have sufficient knowledge to be able to actually add value meaningfully. But a chap did come along, as I told you earlier, and he could do that. And it's this art, and every chef, and I think every restaurateur, unlike me then, who's had experience, would know what I'm talking about, in that ability to slow or speed and judge and jigsaw together the tables and the customers. What it changed from, to your question, was forgive me, sounds as if I'm criticising Dave or Carl or the particular manager at the time. It was what it was, but too often there would be tension and aggression because this flow. The kitchen could get 20 tickets in 10 minutes, which is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous because they're just going to pile up. A kitchen of our size, there's only so much they can.
What's a good? What are you happy with now?
Well, I mean, I'm not best qualified to answer that. There is a sense because it depends also what's on the ticket. So, for example, and the restaurant manager would be adept. That's his job. So everybody goes straight up. Straight up for a chef is not brilliant. It's not the end of the world. Straight up means not having a starter. So the significance of that is, which I've learned, is that a starter comes out more quickly than a main. It varies, but whilst they're getting they're eating their starter, you can get the main on, so to speak.
Starter manages expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So sometimes, depending upon the order, if they go straight up, we have to say, just to manage expectations, it will be 30 to 35 minutes before you get your meal, because we have to cook that, then we rest the meat for 20 minutes, etc., etc. So so to your question about what's the ideal number, it's not 20 under any circumstances in 10 minutes in this restaurant, because we just don't have the capacity. We take 6 covers per 15 minutes normally, sometimes 8. So if they're getting 20 covers on in 10 minutes, it's self-evident. And that's because of poor communication, man. But sometimes, and it's very easy to pontificate from afar, sometimes the restaurant manager has to make the judgment, and that's about communication with the chef, which is now great, about saying, I'm really sorry, chef, we've had to take all those orders, but table 5 was getting really itchy and we're not understanding why we weren't taking their order, even though they arrived 10 minutes late, because we failed to manage their expectations when they arrived. So it's always a combination of things, but it boils down in the end to the cliche of communication.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I think what you've done, the way you've described it, is, and you've done that with your hands, is the jigsaw piece.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it.
Well, it is, because but what will happen is that table 5 will overrun, but their table was turning at 8 o'clock. They're still there at 8:15. Can we swap over to table 4 because they finished early? No, we can't. Could we stack them outside for a moment, get them drinks, order outside? That will give us a breather here. Can we move on the chef? Can you give priority to table 3 because we're turning it in 15 minutes? It's all of that. We weren't good at that at the beginning.
There's a book.
It's nobody's fault.
There's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, I think his name is. And this might be a bit of a hard question, so tell me to fuck off. But I think it's quite. I like to ask some hard questions, but you're in the driving seat, Brendan. But
I think you're in the driving seat.
Yeah, no, on this part.
Okay.
But I think this thinking fast and slow is interesting with restaurants because you need both. So you need the thinking fast is like on your feet in terms of like, as you said, table 6 is going Pete Tong. There's someone's kicking off. You think fast. But then there's the thinking slow of let's refine the menu. Like I suppose the fire allowed you to think slow in some regards.
Yeah, it did. No, it did.
It did. It allows you to.
That's the best example.
Yeah,
we had a space.
You had a space,
and we weren't running a business.
And I think yeah, that is this kind of this thinking fast and slow is really interesting. But there's a quote he says, which is the premise of this book is that it's easier to recognise other people's mistakes than our own. Yeah. What are mistakes you see in others but find hard to spot in yourself? And as I said, that's a hard question. So
it is a hard. No. It's not a question of fuck off. I think it's a really great question. It's for all businesses and for all individuals, and to some extent, it's about self-awareness, and our levels of self-awareness vary. I'm in the happy position that the senior management team here, and it's not the big up Unruly Pig show here, they are very self-aware, and because of the straightforwardness being a key value, they are. I try to lead. I mean, yesterday I just sent an email to Dave, said, "Look, I've cocked up here, and this is what I've done, and so this is the solution." I try and lead.
Done? Okay, yeah, okay.
So boring.
Okay.
So boring.
Okay, no worries.
But I try and lead by everyone's wonderful, aren't they? But I try and lead by having a culture of to err is human.
To where is
To err is human. To make a mistake is human.
okay? Yeah, yeah,
To make
yeah,
a mistake is human.
yeah.
And try and put that into practice is said and done. And by saying, look, this is my mistake, I have cocked up here, to engender, hopefully, a culture of it's okay to make a mistake, providing we learn from it. And I would say every single member of the management team is of that ilk. But I think they were naturally like that anyway. And it's not anything that I've particularly added value to. There are so many mistakes that one makes along the line. I don't, here I am, I'm nearly 30 years older than every member of the senior management team. So I have less excuse objectively, but I still make mistakes. I still say things I regret. I still get too hot-headed, but I think the reason we may still be together is that there is fundamentally a recognition that, the culture here is you're going to make mistakes, and providing we learn from it. We just sat down, we have a number of collaboration dinners, and we had a corking one with the boys from the Bearing in Islington. We were talking about it. It was a real corker, sadly. But the first question, right, what lessons do we need to learn? And that's what we do. I don't want to put us on some plinth and sound very sanctimonious, because it isn't. None of it's rocket science. But I think culturally, if you accept that you're going to make mistakes, that's half a battle. And also being able to say sorry.
Yeah.
And the other thing which was engendered by my wife's no longer involved in the bit because, it's not really her baby. But what used to be really good for the team is we sit down on the senior management team, and she's an ex-lawyer, and she's very straightforward. And I think she's the only person Dave and Carl are scared of. But I think so. But she had this reputation of being completely and utterly fair and objective. It might be wrong, but that would be her. But she would openly criticise me in the meeting, which was a great thing for the chaps to see. To say, she said, "No, Brendan, I think you're wrong about that, and this is the reason why." And I think Dave was making a very good point, and that set a culture. And I was thinking, well, that's a really great thing, because whatever, yes, I'm the boss, and I've got to give some direction and sometimes have to push things through. But I try not to. That they'll probably. But I would like to think that Dave and Carl and Jackie would say, well, he's no pushover, and he can be unreasonable, but mostly we proceed by consensus. Mostly, it's easy to say, but that depends upon a degree of self-awareness where I may be exaggerating my own abilities.
How do you deal with so you've got the number one spot.
Yeah.
There's I think the 1% improvement is, the whole quote of like, only the paranoid survive, which is like I think it's by the guy who did...
I like that. I don't know that quote.
It's by the guy who did... one of the big tech firms.
Okay.
The guy helped create OKRs, which is what Google did, but it's only the paranoid survive. The chocolate company did a bit of work for the bloke's got on his desk, and it's a kind of a positive quote, but it's actually kind of alarming, because it says, complacency, someone else is going to come and overtake you.
Well, that's the continuous improvement point.
Continuous. So that's the positive side of it. The negative side of it is the sleepless nights, the worrying. Like, how do you contend with? I'm asking this selfishly, because sometimes I'm with this podcast. I'm like, if it doesn't keep getting better, I don't keep getting better guests, then you're fucked.
Yeah.
But that's what my friends have been saying to me. It's like, just chill out, mate, and like. And I suppose I'm trying to get to is like, how do you balance the...
I don't know is the answer. I think that's a challenge. I hadn't heard that quote before, but I recognise its merit. And paranoid means you're worrying too much about the competition. Now, I think Dave and Carl and Jackie, if they were taken into the confessional, would say, he's got a few faults, and one of them is he's too bloody paranoid about the competition. I think that's broadly. I wish I wasn't paranoid, if I am, but to be concerned, I think, is a wholly appropriate point and part, forgive me again, of labouring it, the continuous improvement journey, and also keeping an eye on, well, not necessarily the opposition, what others are doing. And when I'm going out and eating in London, my wife says, could you sort of focus on me and not...
Yeah, okay.
Can you focus on me
Yeah,
for once?
okay.
As opposed to, you like that idea there, or you've got that light up. But she's a bugger too, because we're sitting in a restaurant that has been mentioned today, and she said, look, they've got that bulb out. So I just think that's going to come with the territory.
I think
and,
it does, yeah.
and being, to your point, not to the point where you're losing sleep. Have there been times when you've lost sleep about the Unruly Pig? Oh, for sure, particularly around the fire in those first 3 weeks. And occasionally things bother me, but I don't tend to lose sleep over the Unruly Pig. There are things that bother me, but I think having a paranoia about, are we going to get bums on seats by being better than we were, I think that comes with the territory.
Yeah, I also think net, it's a good thing. It's just
Net is a good thing. Yeah.
when it spills over. What other than the fire, what's been like the hardest day of your life?
Worrying. Worrying about how I was going to pay people in COVID before the furlough scheme. Yeah.
Describe that period.
Well, it was just that, it was the same for everybody throughout the country. I'm no different. But I can't remember the sequence. It wasn't very long, Dan, but we were all closed down on the 23rd of March 2020, and it was then you're thinking, I can't keep 30 odd people going ad infinitum on my savings, but let's just pretend we can to see what the hell. And it wasn't long before Rishi announced the furlough scheme. I remember, don't ask why, I can't even remember, but I was in contact with my MP, Therese Coffey, and she happens to be a big Catholic, and I just sent her a note and said, thank you so much. I might go back to Mass after 40 years. I remember saying that.
Yeah, that's true.
I was so...
Yeah. And you've had a lot of blows, Brendan, in terms of just... what I really like your story, we've kind of crossed across both paths. We've talked about, like, we started with the fire, we went into the kind of the quirkiness, but I think to do anything requires people to be able to take blows and like hits and get, as the old adage is, get knocked down and get back up again. It's like,
Oh, that song.
yeah. I'll start singing that. Yeah, it's a fucking good song.
Yeah.
But like, what do you say to yourself in these? Because everyone listens to this.
And Dave knows this.
How do you keep on keeping on?
How do you keep on keeping on? Firstly, when I'm down, my wife's my rock. Look, and she's very plain speaking. Yeah, we've got a rough period ahead. This is the issues. This is what we're going to do. I'm not saying it's going to win, but look, you're worrying on Julie at the moment. Let's judge this. She's always been the same, that when I'm down and not feeling up to it, she's there. I suppose 36 years as a solicitor and litigator must have built in some resilience. It wasn't easy, my job, and there were times when it was very difficult and very stressful, and I had to... part of my job involved, at one point, rationalisation of the product, which meant me going around and executing redundancy programs in varying offices and facing up to people and who I had worked with closely for years, and you can't anybody who can.
How do you approach that conversation?
Well, first of all, the answer is you have to approach it carefully with the support of it, because there's certain things and ways that has to be done. But you also have to face the music and not cross the road when the person who you've just put under redundancy notice is walking the other side of the street in Nottingham, and just let them have their say. I mean, I am no hero here at all, for Christ's sake. I was sworn at, but I also had somebody come up to me ultimately, and it was in the Nottingham office, and she maintained contact thereafter and said, I hated you, and you were doing what you needed to do, but you dealt with it in a fair and transparent way, and you answered my questions. And if that made... She went on to great things, by the way, but that
She worked for you.
Yes.
She said she hated you.
She hated me because of the redundancy program and that
Right.
was instituting. And and I don't want to sound like some holy Joe, but sometimes... so doing that was... those were low moments, but there were moments... it was good for you. You can't complain if you're paid at a reasonable level and you have a high-pressured job. It's like, get out of the kitchen if you can't stand the bloody heat. And you don't have to do it, but you can tend to take the money, aren't you? So shut the fuck up and get on with it and don't complain about it. But I did, there are times when, unless you were... So back to the plot. Because I was a litigator and, you're sometimes knocking... or attempting to knock the other side and vice versa, you get bows, and there are nice solicitors and the less nice solicitors and all of that. The stuff of business, whether it be the example I've cited where we made a decision to rationalise where work was done within the national network of offices, and you end up doing a redundancy programme, you may be a litigator and tough on the outside, but those people who appear tough on the outside are often the softest, and it would be wrong that didn't affect me and you get low. But that's life. I was paid at a handsome level, so don't bloody well complain. But those were, there were hard days. But that probably instituted some resilience into me. So with my wife there, when I was feeling really low at times, and there's been a couple of incidences where I've been really low at the Unruly Pig, comparatively few, less than in my former job, because I'm in a lucky position. I like it. I love it. I mean, I love the Unruly Pig. But yeah, and I suppose the answer is, well, don't go and open the Unruly Pig if you think it's going to be a bed of roses, because it ain't, and that would be naive. Did I expect fire, COVID, cost of living? No. Oh, we're still here, aren't we?
What are some of the other surprising things?
Culture.
Culture.
Forgive me, hospitality, because you're going to say, well, we know a load of bent lawyers, and Christ, you're all sharks. Guilty. Well, not to being bent. I find the dishonesty in hospitality disappointing, i.e.
Dishonesty.
Well, I've had to dismiss too many members of staff for stealing tips, stealing drink, that you need to supervise deliveries, that there are places that are run to tills. I'm not sure whether this is right. I can't comment, Dan, because I haven't worked anywhere else, and I don't want to sound like some holy Joe again, but my first restaurant manager said, you're the only man who's properly declaring VAT. And I said, well, you've got to sleep at night, and I'm not sure that's right. But, suppliers, trusted suppliers, under-delivering deliberately, and you test weigh, and I found that challenging. Well, some people would say, why are you finding that challenging? Lawyers have a dreadful reputation. Yeah, I get. But broadly, a lawyer's word, with obvious exception, is his bond. If he said X, then X would happen. So I found that culture, I found it shocking initially, and now it's water off a duck's back, that people don't turn up for interview. I found it.
That's what you were talking about earlier about how, which is kind of a shame, is how hospitality in this country, comparatively to say Europe and Ireland, it's quite a transient job.
Yeah, and less professional.
Like, how do we, like, can we change that? Is that so systemic, or what's, like, because obviously, you're in a position now with this place where you can get. What I find interesting with you, mate, is that these guys have been here for like 8-9 years, which is a very long, extremely long tenure in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme.
Like, what from having people who have been extremely loyal, who see it as a vocation, not necessarily like a transient kind of stepping stone. What are some of the things we think how we could change that? Or is it like, we're British, that's the way things work over here, we've got massive financial services, the city, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of, you can't solve it.
Well, never say never.
Yes, a bit
never say
nihilistic to think you can't solve it.
Never say never, and there will be plenty of places listening to this podcast and say, I don't recognise that picture at all, and I think it is. So, but broadly, I think it is a truism, as you alluded to, that the continent waiting front of house is seen as a profession and something to be proud of, in a way that it isn't here. Okay, I don't believe you can change culture overnight. When my mother came over from Ireland in 1946, and she was trying to find somewhere to live, she did encounter, it wasn't myth, on the boarding houses it said, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Dream of having that. The Race Relations Act, I think it's 69, but don't rely on that, it might be 61. But it's the Race Relations Act was introduced for a reason, because of the blatant racism. There's still latent racism. I mean, if you look at what are the motivating factors behind Brexit, some would say racism. There's an open debate about it, it's more complex, but nevertheless. But the Race Relations Act has produced a fundamental shift in British values, and whether it be gay and lesbian relationships or race relations, things have changed over 40 or 50 years, and so to your point, anything can change when there is a motivation and a will. I don't know is the answer. It's it's way above my head. I think it's a complex question, but at the moment, it's why do and I mean this in a positive way. Why do Asian families obsess about getting their kids into the law and medicine, as opposed to engineering? We need engineers. We might need some lawyers. We certainly need doctors. I don't know. These cultural shifts can happen, but implicit in your question is, do you think something can be done that will change this culture to make this a highly esteemed and valued thing within Britain, for hospitality to be more highly regarded within 5 years? No, I don't.
Yeah, well, it's just crazy. It's such a paradox, because on the one hand, we've never had more restaurants and chefs and people wanting to be chefs, and food is like a revolution.
Yeah.
The founder of Pizza Pilgrim said 2011 was like 1960 for food, was like 1962 for music, i.e. the Beatles, because you had this melting point, this point where you had the rise of social media, street food becoming a thing, more restaurants like your Pizza Pilgrims, your Patty and Buns, kind of MasterChef getting bigger than what it was, Great British Menu, had this melting pot. Suddenly this huge multicultural London and Manchester and stuff like that, got all this food from the top. So the top down, the restaurants are really pushing the boundaries, and it's becoming better than ever. But bottom up, i.e. like, how do we get people into hospitality? How is it less transient? As we were saying, like, most restaurants are open because of COVID, Brexit and cost of living, can't open Monday, Tuesday. That we were saying today, I was like, where should I go for dinner? You're like, well, mate, there's no open tonight. So it's like we've got this paradox of, like, we've got all these amazing restaurants like the Greyhound, like you said, opening, but then they can't open. So it's like, I don't know if we're going to get to the answer on this, but it's just interesting how it's like, on the one hand, it's rising like it's never done before, but on the other hand, it's like...
I think it is I think it's a bit like a quadratic equation. There's many elements to it, and balancing it is extremely difficult. I'm never good at quadratic equations.
I don't even know what quadratic equation is.
It was, for my, I'm so old, I did a low-level maths, you did GCSE. My maths master said, it's a travesty of the examination system that I ever passed maths. Anyway, I got a grade C. Anyway, quadratic equation is a long equation. It's multifactorial, and I think the issue is multifactorial. Perversely, as expectations post-COVID, for whatever reason, are higher in terms of service demands, we touched upon it. I don't know why.
But where is that from? Is that so? People. So just for listeners, people when they go to
more snappy fingers.
Yeah, people when they go into a restaurant now have higher expectations of service.
I think if you put that to the top 50 gastropubs, I think most would agree. But I think it's not exclusive to hospitality. But to the point, because they have higher expectations and because they should know that there are acute labour shortages across the board, but particularly in hospitality, you would like to think that then when they get someone, that they would value and esteem them even more, and that collectively that could be the beginning of a movement to holding and valuing hospitality and those working it even more. That's logical. The problem is your average person coming in to the Unruly Pig, your average person, and I don't ask me which percentage, say, oh, right, the hospitality shortages, why is that? Really? But you see, unless you're in hospital or being cared for in a care home, the brutality of Brexit and its labour shortages, even though they're across the board, and in abattoirs, etc., you don't normally get confronted by it because it's at its most acute in the health sector, in the care sector, and in the hospitality. There are shortages everywhere. We haven't got enough engineers. So I guess on a day-to-day basis, people don't really encounter the the labour shortages caused by Brexit. So maybe that's why what I'm kind of hoping for, that because labour is so short, and then when they get great service, that they may value it all the more and be more reasonable. I think it's illusory because broadly they're just being more demanding.
And then, so that basically meant, like, because of COVID and Brexit, people went back to the people who were in hospitality went back to a lot of them went back to their
they went. There's two things operating. They went back to their home countries because they didn't feel welcome, just wanted to go home, whatever.
Sure.
And then two, a number said, and I had a restaurant manager, and who can blame her? Who can blame her? And said, do you know what? I've really enjoyed the lockdowns. I've really enjoyed spending Saturday nights at home. I've really enjoyed not being there 1 o'clock in the morning. And if you are a father of 3 children, would you rather go and be a waiter or a delivery driver when you can get home by 8 o'clock?
Yeah, it's...
And the economics of running a restaurant with a 20% VAT rate, for those not in the know, we're one of the few countries in Western Europe who charges VAT in hospitality services at 20%. Many are on 5, 7, 8, 9. But with that, the fact of the matter is, running a restaurant with a 20% VAT rate and increasing labour costs and food, it's a really difficult gig, which in effect precludes you from paying huge amounts of wages. Johnson's theory, pay them enough and you'll get the right staff. It just doesn't work that way in real world. I mean, I like to think we pay the best. They certainly get the best tips around here, at least, and it's still difficult.
Final thing to wrap up with, Brendan. But I've just loved seeing all of this and understanding the way things work. But I'd love to know, what is one thing that you guys thought and believed differently that no one else believed on that top 50 list, that made you think you got to that number one spot? Like, what was the one? Say the other 49 pubs went that way. How did you go that way?
I honestly don't know. I can't spot one thing, and I don't think there is one thing. We're extremely lucky. And I know that may sound like a polite thing to say. We're extremely lucky for such a volatile list to have got back up at number one. It wasn't what we were expecting. When we got to number one, I wasn't going to the awards ceremony because the previous year we got to number 10, and I thought...
So did you go to number 1 and then number 10?
Then we know we were 10,
Yeah.
1, 2, and 1. So we've gone...
What's the feeling like? What's the feeling when you drop? Like...
Oh, for God's sake, when we dropped to number 2, I say elated. I mean, of course, oh, come on. Of course you would have preferred to be number 1 for the second year running and say, yeah, of course. But is that realistic? We got to number 1, for Christ's sake. We said, we went up there and said anything in the top 10 would be lovely. To your point, I wasn't, the first time we got to number 1, I wasn't going to go to the awards ceremony because we got to number 10 and I thought, I'm not sure it gets much better than that for us. We're doing nicely. Thank you very much indeed.
And is it all announced on the night?
It's all announced on the night. Yeah. And I got a phone call that said, you're not coming? And I said, no. I said, look, you might want to come to this one. And I thought, and I put the phone down and I said to Dave and Carl, what do you think? You probably won a special award or something, you know, I don't know, best newcomer or... So I did go, and then, whoa, there was an emotional wreck that night, I'm telling you. Well, you can see I'm emotional. We were I think we all...
How did you celebrate that? Or,
Jesus.
Whereabouts was it in
Manchester.
It was in Manchester? Oh,
yeah.
I went to uni in Manchester. Whereabouts in Manchester?
Cool city. It was at the Freight Yard or something
Escape Freight Island?
Freight Island, yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing venue. Yeah.
So it's there. Well, how did we celebrate? Well, I was travelling across from Derbyshire, don't ask, and my wife, we went up there, and I get this call from Dave Wall, and said, oh, Brendan, hi, how are you? Just to manage your expectations, I had a bit of a tumble last night, and I said, what? He said, yeah, I've got a big gash in my head, and I said, how'd you do that? He said, oh, I just slipped on some cobbles, and I go, and there's this great big thing, and there's this photograph of us winning the prize, and this huge gash. He should have gone to hospital. Anyway, that night, to your question, we all celebrated in Hawksmoor, and loads of people from the awards went there, and then we moved on to the Albert Schloss beer house, as you do. Only when we are going to go in, a certain person was asked not to go in, undoubtedly maybe just because of the gash on his head, and nothing to do with the fact that he may have fallen off the tables in there the night before.
Oh, that's
because that would be slanderous to suggest that.
So had he known the night before that he'd won?
No,
he's just on
the boys, because it's a long way. The chaps went up the night before. I was going to Derbyshire. I was coming over that morning
with you.
So they went out and rightly, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So back to your original question. I don't think there's anything I could teach the top 50. There isn't anything that... I mean, if you look at the players in there, players non-pejoratively, they're amazing players, and happily some of them have become, I think, good friends. But, you know, look at Dan Smith, the Ford Witch and the Bridge, 2 separate Michelin stars. Tom De Keyser, Michelin star. You know, there's loads of great players. Look at the Parker's Arms. You know, the Freemasons. There's so many. So no, I think there's an awful lot of luck. In saying that, I don't in any way wish my comments to be misinterpreted and impliedly demeaning. It was fluke. It hasn't happened by accident, and it's an amazing credit to Dave Wall, Carl Green and Jackie Carr, who worked so damn hard trying to do all the things we were talking about earlier, about continuously improving and all of that jazz. And it's an absolute privilege to be there, and it's probably the highlight of their professional lives. And certainly,
it's amazing. It's amazing.
I shall go. Don't want to talk this one up to my grave. Proud as punch as to what these chaps have done and achieved. Because when I bought the Unruly Pig, I set them the target of I would like us guys to be one of the best pubs in Suffolk, and instead they made us one of the best pubs in the United Kingdom, and it doesn't get better than that. And what a happy Hector I am.
Yeah. Brendan, let's wrap that up there.
All right.
I've absolutely
Well, love speaking to you.
loved
Thank you.
that. It was so good to get these